The emergency alert on my phone had just 2 words: evacuate immediately. I stared at the screen, thinking it was some kind of prank app, until an explosion went off outside and the entire building trembled. I was still working overtime, editing a draft. Chasing this damn trending topic was making my head spin, and the editor-in-chief was insisting on a viral headline. I thought for a long while, what's happening to the Magic City? Citizens late at night. Before I could finish typing, my phone went crazy. First, an official government alert, then notifications from all sorts of apps, all of them with the same 2 words: evacuate immediately. Someone downstairs was letting out a blood-curdling scream. It wasn't an ordinary scream, but a hair-raising shriek that seemed to erupt from the very depths of the soul. Downstairs was in utter chaos. The light in the complex's security booth was still on, but it was empty inside. Several cars were parked haphazardly in the middle of the road, their headlights still on, but the drivers were nowhere to be seen. My phone buzzed incessantly. The work group chat was blowing up. Check the news. Have you seen the video from the hospital? Those people are insane. Run as far as you can. I opened the video being shared in the group. The footage was shaky, as if it had been secretly recorded. In a hospital corridor, several people were, no, you couldn't call them people. They were tearing at others with their teeth. They moved like wild beasts, their eyes bloodshot, letting out inhuman snarls. The video cut off after only a dozen seconds or so. My hands were shaking. Another explosion from outside, closer this time. The lights across the entire complex went out in an instant, and darkness flooded in like a tide. Only the flickering glow of a distant fire remained, staining half the sky red. I turned on my phone's flashlight. My first instinct was to pack: wallet, ID, power bank. The most important thing now was to run. There were already noises in the hallway, someone shouting, and someone else banging on a door. Please, I'm begging you, open the door. I recognized the voice of Auntie Wang from upstairs. Usually so cheerful, her voice was now filled with terror. Her voice suddenly vanished, replaced by the sound of chewing. I almost threw up. I grabbed my car keys and made my way downstairs in the dark. The hallway was filled with a foul, coppery stench. I tried not to think about what it was. The fire door on the 5th floor was open, and a low, gasping sound came from within. Holding my breath, I crept past, hugging the wall. I didn't dare turn on my phone's light, afraid of attracting attention. In the 2nd floor hallway, something was moving. By the firelight from the window, I saw a figure hunched over on the floor, its shoulders heaving, as if it were eating. Fighting the urge to vomit, I tiptoed down, one step at a time. The thing suddenly lifted its head. It was my neighbor, old Mr. Chin, or rather, what he used to be. His face was covered in blood, the whites of his eyes were gone, and he was clutching something in his mouth. He saw me. I bolted. Behind me, I heard the sound of pursuing footsteps and that same bone-chilling snarl. The ground floor entrance had been smashed open, and I burst into the underground garage. The garage was pitch black, save for the faint green glow of the emergency lights. I frantically mashed the button on my car key, following the sound to find my car. Just as I opened the car door, a figure lunged at me from the shadows. No, it wasn't human. Its clothes were in tatters, its body covered in bite marks, and it moved with a strange, contorted gait. The most terrifying part was its eyes, completely bloodshot, devoid of any human consciousness. On instinct, I grabbed the umbrella I kept in the car and jabbed it hard into the thing's face. Black blood splattered all over me. The thing collapsed to the ground, convulsing. Not daring to look any longer, I jumped into the car and started the engine. The barrier at the garage exit had already been smashed. I slammed on the gas and shot out, nearly crashing into a taxi stalled in the middle of the road. The streets had become a living hell. Screams, explosions, and those inhuman snarls were everywhere. Some people were running, others were chasing, and even more lay in pools of their own blood. A woman clutching a child ran past my car, pursued by 3 of those things. I wanted to stop and help them, but more of the infected were swarming from all directions. Gritting my teeth, I swerved around them and headed for the outer ring road. In my rearview mirror, the mother and child vanished into the darkness. My phone's GPS was useless. The traffic map was a solid, deep red. I had to rely on memory, heading for the highway entrance. I lost count of the things I plowed through on the way. The radio still worked, so I tuned it to a news channel. We urge all citizens to remain calm. The government is doing everything in its power to. The signal died. I changed the station. The infected are extremely aggressive. After being bitten, victims will turn within 30 minutes. It cut out again. Finally, I found a station that was still broadcasting. This is an emergency broadcast. Attention, all survivors. Stay away from the infected. Do not attempt to rescue the wounded. Do not attempt to help anyone who has been bitten. The virus is transmitted through bodily fluids, and the incubation period is extremely short. The safe zones in every district had fallen completely silent. That's when I realized that back in the garage, the creature's blood had splattered onto my face. Fear washed over me like a torrent of ice water. I frantically wiped my face with wet wipes as I drove, not stopping until the entire pack was used up. Ahead lay the Outer Ring Road, an elevated expressway usually teeming with traffic. Now it resembled a massive parking lot, clogged with countless vehicles. Some had their doors flung open, others had smoke still billowing from their hoods. I had no choice but to take the surface streets. Passing a gas station, I saw at least 20 people looting the convenience store. Shelves were toppled, the glass doors smashed, and people descended like locusts on anything they could eat or drink. My tank was still over half full. I didn't dare to stop. But not everyone was so lucky. An Audi tried to force its way into the line for gas, immediately sparking a confrontation. 7 or 8 people swarmed the car, and in less than a minute, the driver was dragged out. I saw someone raise a wrench. I had to get out of there. After a long detour, I finally spotted the entrance to the G15 expressway. The tollgate barriers had been smashed to pieces. The toll booth was deserted, with only the flicker of a computer screen inside. I slowed down and navigated through cautiously. The situation on the expressway was better than I'd imagined. Though littered with abandoned cars, the road was at least passable. Far from the city, the apocalyptic scenes began to subside. At 2 in the morning, I pulled into a service area. It wasn't because I was tired, but because the low fuel warning light was on. The lights of the service area were still on, but the parking lot was almost completely full. After searching for a while, I finally found a spot, only to see a crowd gathered around the gas station. A large truck was blocking the gas station's exit, its front pointed directly at the convenience store entrance. The driver was a middle-aged man in camouflage, holding a steel pipe. One at a time. His voice boomed with an unquestionable authority. "Why should you be the one calling the shots?" Someone challenged him. "Because of this." The man pointed to the truck behind him. "I can open this road, or I can block it for good." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but they eventually fell into an orderly line. I joined the line. The people ahead of me were murmuring among themselves. "Shanghai is done for. My family is still in there. Don't think about it. We're lucky just to have escaped. They say it started at a hospital. My friends said it was the port. Who cares where it started? The entire city has fallen." By the time it was my turn, my fuel tank was running on fumes. I quickly filled the tank, grabbed a few bottles of water and some food. The truck driver called out to me. I nodded. He sized me up. "You've got blood on your face." My heart sank. It splattered on me earlier. I wiped it off. If I were going to turn, I would have by now. He pulled a bottle of alcohol from his pocket. "Disinfect it again. Rinse out your eyes and mouth too." I took it gratefully. "Don't mention it." He smiled, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deepening. "We're all just running for our lives. Got to help each other out when we can." "Still hauling freight?" "I'm Lin Chensi." Just as he spoke, a sudden commotion erupted at the entrance to the service area. Several cars came tearing in, horns blaring wildly. "They're being followed," someone screamed. At least a dozen of those things were chasing the cars, moving with terrifying speed. They lunged at the crowd on site, and the scene instantly devolved into chaos. "Everyone, stay calm," Lao Zhang shouted. "Drivers, get to your vehicles." Everyone else, behind the truck. But it was too late. An infected tackled an attendant by the pumps. Blood sprayed as a scream tore through the night air. More of the infected swarmed in, attacking and biting anyone in sight. I turned to run, but saw 2 infected blocking my path. A steel pipe swung out, sending the closer of the 2 infected flying. It was Lao Zhong. "Get in my truck," he shouted, brandishing a steel pipe. Without hesitation, I rushed toward the truck with him. He swiftly opened the door, pushed me up, and jumped in himself. The truck's engine roared as its massive frame barreled forward, running over several infected before bursting out of the gas station. In the rearview mirror, the service area was completely overrun. Flames lit up the sky, and the air was filled with a mixture of screams and roars, a symphony from hell. "Your car." I remembered my car was still back there. Lao Zhang said calmly. "Life is more important than a car." The truck sped down the highway in the dead of night. I sat in the passenger seat, still trembling. "First time seeing those things." I nodded. "You'll get used to it." He paused. "If you live long enough, that is." His words sent a chill down my spine. "What do you think this all is?" Lao Zhang shook his head. The world changed tonight. In the distance, the city was burning. The fire's glow stained half the sky red, and columns of thick smoke pierced the night like giant tombstones. A broken voice crackled from the radio. The Oriental Pearl Tower has. The Bund is completely overrun. All citizens, please evacuate immediately. I glanced at my phone. 3 in the morning. It had been less than 5 hours since I received that notification. In just 5 hours, a megacity of 24 million people had collapsed, just like that. The mask of civilization had been torn away, revealing the bloody truth beneath. From this night on, survival was the only goal. Lao Zhang said, "Come dawn, we'll have a lot of running to do." I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. My mind was filled with images from tonight, the bloodshot eyes, the scenes of tearing flesh, the endless screams. The nightmare had only just begun. As dawn broke, Lao Zhang pulled the truck over onto the emergency lane. I rubbed my eyes. The road ahead is completely blocked. Only then did I see it clearly. The highway ahead had turned into a giant parking lot. Vehicles of all kinds were strewn about haphazardly, some crashed together, others overturned on the roadside. What was more terrifying was that many car doors were open, but there was no one in sight. "Before we get out, take this." Lao Zhang pulled out 2 steel pipes from the back and handed one to me. Holding it in my hand, I felt a sense of security. We cautiously climbed out of the truck. The early morning highway was shrouded in a thin mist, and visibility was low. It was eerily quiet all around, with only the occasional sound of metal clanking in the distance. Lao Zhang lowered his voice. "If you see those things run, don't even think about fighting." We walked along the emergency lane, trying to find a passable route. As we passed an SUV, I saw its windows were covered in bloody handprints, pressed from the inside. I could only imagine what had happened inside. Lao Zhang tugged at my arm. The further we went, the more gruesome the scene became. Some cars were burnt out husks, severed limbs peeked out from under others, and faint moans could be heard from inside yet more. "Should we?" Lao Zhang refused flatly. "They're probably already infected." There was a stir up ahead. Several figures were moving between the vehicles, their movements stiff, their clothes tattered. The infected. We immediately ducked down, hiding behind a bus. The things seemed to be searching for something, letting out low growls from time to time. One of them suddenly stopped, its nose sniffing the air. "They can smell the living." Lao Zhang made a gesture, signaling for me to follow him. We hunched over and began to retreat quietly. Just then, my foot kicked something, and an empty can went rolling away. The infected instantly whipped their heads around, their bloodshot eyes fixed on our position. Lao Zhang grabbed me and ran, the sound of rapid footsteps and roars erupting behind us. We weaved frantically between the abandoned vehicles. The infected were fast, but they didn't seem to be good at turning, often crashing into the cars. Just as they were about to catch us, Lao Zhang suddenly pulled me into the back of a panel van. The cargo area was filled with cardboard boxes. We hid in the very back, not daring to breathe. The footsteps outside grew closer and closer, then stopped right at the van's doors. I clapped a hand over my mouth, my heart threatening to pound out of my chest. The infected lingered outside, making sniffing sounds from time to time. The steel pipe in my hand was slick with sweat, almost too slippery to hold. After an indeterminate amount of time, the footsteps finally faded into the distance. We waited a while longer, crawling out only when we were sure it was safe. "This isn't going to work." Lao Zhang wiped his sweat. "We need to find a car that runs." We continued our search and, at a bend in the road, finally found a pickup truck that seemed to be in relatively good condition. The keys were still in the ignition, and the gas tank was full. It was a stroke of good luck. Lao Zhang started the engine, and the pickup roared to life. We began to navigate laboriously through the gridlocked traffic, sometimes pushing aside obstructing cars, other times ramming right through them. After about an hour of driving, we finally saw an exit up ahead, towards Jiaxing. I looked at the road sign. "Let's take the exit first," Lao Zhang said, turning the wheel. As soon as we got off the highway, we saw a crowd swarming the toll station. There were local residents as well as refugees like ourselves. Everyone was scrambling for supplies. The scene was pure chaos. The owner of a small supermarket stood guard at the entrance, holding a shovel. "No pushing. There's a limit per person, and it's cash only." "In a time like this, you're still asking for money," someone demanded indignantly. "No money? Then are you going to feed my family?" The owner shot back, refusing to yield. We didn't get involved. Instead, we found a gas station and filled up the tank. While we were refueling, a middle-aged man nearby struck up a conversation. "From Shanghai?" Lao Zhang nodded. "What's the situation like over there?" Lao Zhang's reply was terse. The man sighed. "My son is studying at Fudan University. I can't reach him by phone." The mood suddenly turned somber. Someone holding up a phone yelled, "There's a signal." Everyone immediately crowded around. The news footage was blurry, but it was clearly an aerial shot. Thick smoke billowed over the entire Shanghai metropolitan area, and many places were still burning. The reporter's voice was intermittent, the city center, completely out of control. The military is setting up a quarantine zone. All citizens are advised to stay away from infected areas. The screen cut to a map. The red areas marked the overrun zones, and they were expanding rapidly. It's not just Shanghai, someone cried out in alarm. Nanjing and Hangzhou were also marked in red. A commotion rippled through the crowd. Head north. There's an outbreak in Beijing too. What about west? It's even more chaotic out west. Panic spread like a plague. Some began to loot supplies while others rushed to their cars to escape. The scene spiraled out of control. A gunshot rang out and everyone froze. It was a police officer from the local station, gun in hand. Calm down. Anyone else who starts trouble will be arrested on the spot. The crowd finally quieted down somewhat. The officer continued, the authorities are organizing an evacuation, so please maintain order. The infected fear fire and heat. Take precautions. We'll survive if we stick together. But the order his words brought was short-lived. Because just then, a familiar roar echoed from the distance. They've caught up to us. Dozens of the infected swarmed out of the highway exit, pouncing on anyone in sight. The crowd, which had been squabbling moments ago, scattered in terror. The officer fired a few shots, but it was a drop in the bucket. At Lao Zheng's shout, we leaped into the pickup and he floored it, speeding out of the gas station. That small town was now living the same nightmare as Shanghai. The pickup sped along a country road, farmland on either side appearing and disappearing in the morning mist. Now and then, we'd see a farmer, hoe in hand, running for home. Maybe it's better in the countryside. Don't be naive, Lao Zheng said, shaking his head. This thing spreads too fast. Nowhere is safe. A new report came over the car radio. Urgent announcement. The State Council has initiated a Level 1 emergency response. All infected zones will be under military control. Temporary shelters are being set up. Citizens are advised to evacuate in an orderly fashion. I repeat, temporary shelters. I murmured the phrase and asked, do you think we can trust it? Lao Zheng was silent for a moment. We should check it out. It's better than just wandering the roads. According to the broadcast, the nearest shelter was at a middle school in the northern suburbs of Jiaxing. The number of refugees grew. Some were driving, others were pushing handcarts, but all seemed to be heading to the same destination. As we approached the shelter, a long line of traffic had formed ahead. This time it wasn't due to an accident, but a checkpoint that had been set up. Several military vehicles blocked the road. Soldiers, carrying live ammunition, were inspecting everyone one by one. Temperature check. Everyone out of your vehicles. We stood in the long line, our hearts pounding with anxiety. Ahead of us, people were continuously being led away for a myriad of reasons: fever, physical injuries, erratic behavior. When it was our turn, a young soldier pointed a temperature gun at my forehead. Old Zhang got through smoothly as well. Turn right up ahead. The parking area is on the athletic field. Accommodations will be assigned at 8 p.m. sharp. Don't wander off. Only after entering the settlement did I realize the place was already overflowing with people. The athletic field was covered with tents, while the main school building had been converted into a temporary medical station. Refugees with their families in tow were everywhere, their faces numb and their eyes vacant. We parked our car in a corner. Let's get supplies first. Old Zhang pointed to where a long line was forming in the distance. The line was long and moved excruciatingly slowly. In front of me in line was a mother and her daughter. The little girl, who looked to be about 7 or 8, was timidly clutching the hem of her mother's clothing. When is Daddy coming? The woman's eyes instantly reddened. Daddy's right behind us. He'll be here very soon. My heart sank. It was a grim promise she would likely have to repeat for a lifetime. When it was finally our turn, we each received 2 bottles of water, 3 packs of compressed biscuits, a blanket, and a mask. The staff member distributing the supplies looked resigned. Supplies are tight. For now, we're just making sure everyone gets a share. And for dinner? The cafeteria serves at 7. 1 portion per person. Carrying these meager supplies, we returned to the car. Let's ration these, Old Zhang said, stowing the compressed biscuits. Who knows how long we'll be stuck here? In the afternoon, a list of precautions began to play on a loop over the loudspeakers. Attention, all residents. The infected exhibit the following traits: bloodshot eyes, violent behavior, and biting the living. If you see anyone with these symptoms, report them immediately. Anyone who has been bitten must be quarantined for observation. I looked out the car window. The sunlight was beautiful. If not for the refugee camp on the athletic field, it would be hard to believe that the events of last night were real. Children chased each other between the tents, their fear momentarily forgotten. An elderly man sat on the steps, smoking, his gaze lost in the distance. A couple clung to each other, weeping. It was impossible to know if they were tears of reunion after the ordeal or of a final, tragic farewell. Humans are strange creatures, old Zhang suddenly remarked. It's in moments like these that you truly see the light and darkness of human nature. Suddenly, shouting erupted from the other side of the field as two groups of people began to fight. The fight had started over a patch of open ground for pitching a tent. The shoving quickly escalated into a full-blown brawl, and it only stopped when a soldier fired a warning shot. It's already like this on the first day. It will get worse, old Zhang said calmly, especially when supplies truly become scarce. As the sun began to set, an announcement came over the shelter's loudspeakers. Please proceed to the cafeteria in an orderly manner. Maintain discipline. Anyone who violates the rules will have their ration privileges revoked. The cafeteria was teeming with people. Each person received a box of rice, a ladle of vegetables, and a bowl of soup so watery you could see your own reflection. It was meager, but at least it was hot. As I looked for a seat with my tray, I overheard the conversation at the next table. Did you hear? The southern shelter was overrun last night. Are you serious? Dead serious. My cousin just escaped from there. Said someone on the inside got infected. A chill ran down my spine, and I almost dropped my tray. Old Zhang steadied me. Don't listen to these rumors. But the seed of unease had already been planted. At 8 o'clock that night, they began assigning sleeping quarters. We were assigned to a classroom on the third floor of the school building, already crammed with more than 20 other people. It was co-ed, with men and women separated by nothing more than a curtain. Straw mats were laid out on the floor, one spot per person. The conditions are primitive. We appreciate your patience. Remember, lights out at 10. No moving about after that. I found a spot by the window, from which I could see both the athletic field and the main gate. If something were to happen, at least I would know immediately. The classroom was filled with the sound of snoring, punctuated by the cries of children and the soothing whispers of their parents. I couldn't sleep. Scenes from the night before played over and over in my mind. The faces of the infected, the mauling, the burning city. Can't sleep. It was old Zhong's voice. He was leaning against the wall next to me, also wide awake. Any soldier who's seen combat has trouble sleeping. You were really a soldier? He smiled faintly. Special forces. Then how did you end up? He gave a self-mocking laugh. Injured and discharged. I thought I'd live out the rest of my life in peace, but instead, I get to see the apocalypse. What do you really think this is? I asked, finally voicing the question that had been on my mind all day. A bioweapon? He shook his head. I don't know, but I know one thing. No matter what happens, we have to survive. A gunshot rang out from outside the window, then a second, and a third, followed by a chaos of shouts and running. I bolted upright and pressed myself against the window to look outside. On the field, beams from flashlights danced erratically. People were running, people were screaming. Lao Zhang had already grabbed a steel pipe. Everyone in the classroom was jolted awake, and the room descended into chaos. A man shouted, "It might be a drill." But more gunshots shattered his self-deception. A voice could be faintly heard over a loudspeaker. Infected detected in the east sector. All personnel remain indoors. Repeat, infected detected in the east sector. As I watched the increasingly chaotic scene on the field, my heart sank. The settlement had fallen. This place, meant to be a safe haven, hadn't even lasted 24 hours. Pack your things, Lao Zhang said in a low voice. Prepare to withdraw. I frantically started packing my belongings. The others, also realizing the dire situation, began to pack their things. Just then, hurried footsteps echoed from the hallway, along with that familiar, blood-curdling roar. They're here. The footsteps in the hallway grew closer, mingled with roars and the sound of banging on doors. The 20-odd people in the classroom were crammed together in a panic. Some wanted to rush out, others tried to hide. The scene was one of utter chaos. Lao Zhang growled, "Go out there and you die." His commanding presence calmed everyone down slightly. Push the desks against the door. A few men snapped to their senses and scrambled to move them. The women cowered in a corner, clutching their children and trembling. Something slammed against the door, and the entire frame shuddered. The desks barely held, but it was clear they wouldn't last long. Lao Zhang pointed to the window beside me. "Can you make the jump?" I craned my neck to look out. We were on the third floor, with a concrete pavement at least 7 or 8 meters below. "The fall will kill us," someone said despairingly. "Better to die from the fall than be eaten alive." Lao Zhang was already taking down the curtains. "Women and children first. We'll bring up the rear." The pounding from outside grew more violent, and the desks began to shift. Through the crack in the door, I saw a single, bloodshot eye. It was not the eye of a human. Lao Zhang fashioned a rope from the curtains, but it was clearly not long enough. The others quickly took off their jackets, tying them together to add to the length. The first to go was a young girl who trembled as she climbed out of the window. "Don't look down. Hold tight to the rope." She was only halfway down when the door was forced open a crack and an arm snaked through. The skin was rotting, the fingernails black as it clawed frantically. Several men rushed forward, throwing their weight against the desks. But the infected possessed astonishing strength, and the gap in the doorway grew wider. The girl finally made it to the ground. Then a second person went, and a third. When it was the mother and daughter's turn, the little girl flatly refused to jump, clinging to her mother and sobbing. "It's okay, sweetie. Mommy will hold you." The door burst open completely, and 3 infected creatures stormed in. They moved with bizarre, contorted motions, black saliva drooling from their mouths. The man nearest the door was tackled before he could even react, letting out a blood-curdling scream. Lao Zhang shoved me out the window. I grabbed the rope instinctively, the sharp pain in my palms keeping me lucid. Behind me, a hellcape of tearing flesh and agonizing screams erupted. The moment I hit the ground, a sharp pain shot through my ankle, but there was no time to pay it any mind. Lao Zhang followed right after, landing steadily on his feet. He helped me to my feet, and I gritted my teeth and nodded. The field was a scene of utter chaos. Everywhere, people were fleeing from pursuing infected, searchlights swept wildly, and gunshots rang out incessantly. "Get the truck." We ran hunched over, hugging the base of the wall as we made our way to the parking lot. The scene along the way was one of despair. Soldiers were in full retreat, overwhelmed by the growing horde. People were being tackled to the ground, while others began to convulse and turn moments after being bitten. The most terrifying sight was a man who, just moments before, had been running for his life. He suddenly stopped, his body shaking violently. In less than 30 seconds, he turned around, his eyes already bloodshot, and joined the ranks of the infected. The transformation was happening faster than it did last night. We finally reached the parking lot. The pickup truck was still there. Lao Zhang started the engine. Just as I was about to get in, I saw the mother and daughter hiding behind a nearby car. The little girl's face was streaked with tears as her mother shielded her with her body. Lao Zhang glanced at me, said nothing, and turned the truck around. As if seeing their saviors, the mother and daughter scrambled into the back seat. An infected lunged forward, slamming against the window. Lao Zhang slammed his foot on the accelerator, and the pickup roared towards the main gate. The main gate had been smashed open, its guards nowhere in sight. We sped out of the settlement, leaving the fires and screams behind us. "Thank you," the woman murmured over and over, clutching her child tightly. I glanced back. The settlement was burning, and those who couldn't escape in time were trapped inside forever. The pickup truck sped through the night. No one spoke, save for the little girl's occasional sobs. "We continue north," Lao Zhang said, staring ahead. "Towards Qingdao." "Why Qingdao?" "The naval base is there. If there's any order left, it'll be there." "Let's hope so." After driving for over an hour, the fuel tank was nearly empty again. "We need to find a place to refuel," Lao Zhang frowned. "It's hard to find a gas station on a country road this late at night." When we finally spotted one, we found it had been looted clean. "The storage tanks should still have some," Lao Zhang said, holding a flashlight. "They're underground." He pried open the lid to the storage tank and started pumping out fuel with a hand pump. I was on lookout. The night was quiet, filled only with the chirping of insects and the barking of a distant dog, yet the silence was unnerving. The little girl was whispering something. The woman rummaged through her pockets, but only found half a biscuit. I handed her my ration biscuit. The little girl took it timidly. Watching her devour it, my heart ached. The apocalypse had only just begun. How long could any of us last? Lao Zhang dusted off his hands, and just as he was about to get in the truck, the sound of engines came from the distance. It was a convoy of about 7 or 8 vehicles, roaring towards us with their high beams blazing. "Here comes trouble," Lao Zhang muttered. The convoy stopped in front of us, and a dozen or so men got out, armed with various weapons. Their leader was a bald man with a tattoo on his neck. "Looks like someone beat us to it," he said, sizing us up, his gaze lingering on the mother and daughter for a few moments. "We've already pumped our fuel," Lao Zhang said calmly, "but there's plenty left for you." The bald man laughed as his men began to surround us. "Hand over the food," he said, pointing to the woman. "And they're coming with us." "Not a chance." Lao Zhang tightened his grip on the steel pipe. "Don't be stupid," the bald man snarled, pulling out a knife. "There's no law anymore." The air crackled with tension. I quietly reached for the steel pipe in the truck. A sudden roar echoed out and everyone froze. The roars grew closer, mingled with the sound of chaotic footsteps. Someone screamed that at least 20 or 30 infected were charging out of the darkness, their speed astonishing. The scene instantly descended into chaos. The bald man yelled, but it was too late. The infected swarmed the group, biting indiscriminately as screams echoed through the night. Lao Zhang shoved us into the truck. The bald man tried to stop us, but was pounced on by an infected. His knife clattered to the ground, his own scream piercingly sharp. The pickup roared to life, and we tore out of the melee. In the rearview mirror, the entire convoy was being wiped out. How did they get here so fast? I asked, still shaken. The scent of blood, said Lao Zhang. Their sense of smell is keener than a dog's. As the truck continued north, the little girl, having cried herself to sleep, rested in her mother's arms. The woman stared out the window, her eyes vacant. My husband is still in Shanghai, she said suddenly. He's a doctor. He said he would stay at his post until the very end. I didn't know how to comfort her, so in the end I just said, he would have wanted you both to be safe. At 4 a.m, as the eastern sky began to show the first light of dawn, we stopped to rest at an abandoned service area. The place looked long abandoned, with overgrown weeds and dilapidated buildings. It's safer here, Lao Zhang said after scouting the area. The infected don't like open spaces. We settled into the convenience store at the gas station, though its shelves were picked clean. But at least it had a roof to shelter us from the elements. Lao Zhang brought some supplies from the truck. We have to ration these, he said. No telling when we'll find more. A few packs of biscuits and some blankets. It wasn't much, but it was all we had. We'll hit the road at dawn. I leaned against the corner, wide awake. Images from the night flashed through my mind. The fall of the settlement, the pursuit by the infected, the destruction of the bald man's crew. The world had fallen apart too fast to even comprehend. She woke up. What happened? I had a nightmare, she whispered. I dreamed Daddy became a monster. My heart sank. A child's intuition is often frighteningly accurate. I patted her on the head. She nodded and nestled against her mother again. As dawn broke, sunlight streamed through the shattered glass, illuminating the dusty floor. If it weren't for our own ragged appearance, it would be hard to believe how much the world had changed. Time to go. Lao Zhang got to his feet. After packing up our things, we got back on the road. In the daylight, the highway seemed even more desolate. Abandoned cars littered the road, some of them still smoking. A roadside billboard, swaying precariously in the wind, made the words, "a civilized city," seem particularly ironic. The radio could still pick up a few signals. Jinan has fallen. The number of infected is rising sharply. The military is establishing a final line of defense in Qingdao. The final line of defense. I mulled over the words. Could this truly be our last hope? A roadblock appeared ahead. Several military vehicles were parked across the road, with soldiers manning machine guns. Hands on your head. A soldier approached, pointing his gun at us. Where are you from? Lao Zhang replied. The settlement was overrun. The soldiers exchanged glances. Everyone out of the vehicle. Prepare for inspection. Temperature checks, full body searches. They even checked under our fingernails. They're clear, said the medic in charge of the inspection. The officer in command walked over. There's a temporary checkpoint 20 kilometers ahead. They'll process you there. Don't try to go around it. The area is mined. Is Qingdao still safe? The officer fell silent for a moment. It's still under control for now. The answer was unsettling. After passing the checkpoint, the military presence on the road became more and more apparent. There were trenches, bunkers, and incineration pits along the roadside. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant and something else, something indescribable, the stench of death. I miss Daddy. The little girl started crying again. Tears streamed down the woman's face as well. Daddy is watching over us from heaven. She wasn't lying this time. The 20 kilometers passed quickly. The temporary checkpoint was set up at a highway service area. It was much larger than the previous settlement. Barbed wire, watchtowers, armored vehicles. Everything indicated a high level of defense. A soldier said, "Follow me." He led us to the registration area. Any special skills? A staff member asked mechanically. When it was Lao Zhang's turn, he hesitated for a moment. Zhong Mingshan. Veteran. The staff member looked up at him. Unit designation? Formerly of the XX Special Forces Brigade. Please wait a moment. An officer strode over quickly. Comrade Zhong Mingshan. Lao Zhang stood at attention. Chief of Staff Li wants to see you. Lao Zhang glanced at me, and I nodded in understanding. Take care of them, he said to me. Then, he left with the officer. After registration, we were assigned to a tent in the family area. The conditions were much better than before. There were cots, and even electricity. We can finally take a shower. The woman showed her first smile in days. Dinner was hot congee and steamed buns. Simple, but it felt like a feast from heaven. During the meal, people in the next tent were talking. Did you hear? The city of Qingdao is under martial law. Then what will happen to us? The army will protect us. They can barely hold on themselves. I pricked up my ears, trying to hear more. Just then, Lao Zheng returned, his expression grim. After a long silence, he finally spoke. The situation is dire. The infection is spreading at a terrifying rate. The military's defense line keeps falling back. They might not be able to hold it. Then what about us? They want me to help train a civilian self-defense force. He looked at me. You have to learn, too. If you want to survive, you have to learn to protect yourself. The checkpoint searchlights swept back and forth, sentries paced in the watchtowers, and everything seemed safe. But I knew it was just the calm before the storm. At 5 in the morning, an alarm siren shattered the pre-dawn silence. All combat personnel, assemble at the south gate. I jolted awake in my sleeping bag. Lao Zheng was already dressed. What's happening? The southern defensive line has been breached. He picked up a steel pipe. You stay here. Don't move. I'm going with you. You said you'd teach me how to protect myself. I insisted. Now's the time. He stared at me for a few seconds, then tossed me an iron rod. Stay close to me and don't be a hero. Outside, it was chaos. Soldiers were assembling. The civilian self-defense force was scrambling to organize, and women and children were being moved to the central area. How many of them are there? At least 1,000, the runner panted, and more are coming. 1,000 infected. A cold sweat broke out on my palms. From the direction of the south gate, gunfire had already erupted. Tracer rounds streaked across the night sky, like deadly fireworks. Militia with me, an officer shouted. We're responsible for holding Sector B. Sector B was where the supply warehouse was located, a critical position. Old Zhong pulled me along as we followed the squad. There were about 30 of us in total, veterans, young men, and a few women like myself. Our weapons were a motley collection: steel pipes, machetes, shovels scavenged from a construction site, and someone was even shouldering a fire axe. Old Zheng whispered his instructions: aim for the head, avoid the teeth, and don't get bogged down. The situation was worse than imagined. The wire fence had been torn open in several places, and a few infected were already squeezing through. Their movements were uncanny, like some kind of reptile. The militia charged forward. It was the first time I had faced an infected one so up close. It might have once been a middle-aged man, but now it was unrecognizable. Skin rotting, eyeballs bulging, black saliva drooling from its mouth. The most terrifying part was its eyes, completely devoid of human reason, containing only a pure lust for slaughter. It lunged at me, and I instinctively raised the iron rod, smashing it down hard on its head. There was a sickening crack as its skull fractured. Black blood splattered all over me, and the stench was almost suffocating. But there was no time for revulsion. More infected were pouring in. Block the breach. We threw everything we could find to barricade it: tables, tires, iron barrels, anything and everything we could get our hands on. But it was a drop in the ocean. The infected were astonishingly strong. Ordinary barricades couldn't hold them back. A single, scrawny infected tore through a sheet of metal with its bare hands. Fall back to the warehouse. We fought as we retreated. Old Zheng was like a precision machine, each of his strikes exact and lethal. His movements possessed a soldier's decisiveness, with no wasted motion. By his side, I gradually found my rhythm. Aim for the head, one killing blow, immediate retreat. At the warehouse entrance, we established a makeshift defensive line. Someone had an idea. A few people quickly fashioned Molotov cocktails, mixing alcohol with gasoline and using cloth strips for wicks. Flames exploded in the midst of the infected horde. They were clearly afraid of the fire, shrieking as they retreated. But our relief was short-lived. A much larger silhouette appeared amidst the flames. It was a mutant, its muscles grotesquely swollen as if pumped full of steroids. It charged straight through the wall of fire, lunging at us while still wreathed in flames. I barely dodged its attack. Its claws gouged deep marks into the ground. Its strength was terrifying. It tossed me aside as if I were a toy. Old Zheng yelled, "Concentrate your fire. Aim for its knees." It finally went down, but immediately pushed itself up again, continuing its attack while supporting its body with its arms. Just when the situation seemed hopeless, a volley of bullets rained down from behind. The army reinforcements had arrived. Amidst the roar of machine guns, the infected fell in droves. Even the mutant couldn't withstand the concentrated fire, and it finally collapsed into a pool of blood. The order came down. All personnel fall back to the central zone. We began an organized retreat. The scene along our retreat was horrifying. Many defensive lines had been breached, and the infected were now rampaging within the camp. A tent area had been completely overrun, and desperate screams echoed from inside. Old Zheng pulled me quickly past, but the screams still found their way into my ears, like the soundtrack to a nightmare. The The Central Zone's defenses were far more robust. Armored vehicles formed a circular perimeter, heavy machine guns firing relentlessly. The infected surged forward like a tide, only to be beaten back like one. We were assigned to the second line, responsible for dealing with any that slipped through the main defense. The battle raged all morning. As the sun climbed higher, the assault finally began to subside. The ground was littered with bodies, mostly infected, but a significant number of humans, too. The air was thick with the mixed stench of gunpowder, blood, and scorched flesh. The casualty count was in. An officer announced with a grim expression that we had lost a sixth of our people. 1/6 in a single morning. The number of infected is still growing, someone else said. If it's like this every day. He didn't finish, but we all knew what he meant. We couldn't hold out for much longer. Old Zhong found the mother and daughter. They were taking shelter in the Central Zone's medical station, safe, but visibly terrified. The little girl started crying the moment she saw me. I held her and could feel her small body trembling. It's okay now. But was it? Was it really okay? The leadership held a meeting, and old Zhong was summoned to attend. His expression was even more solemn when he returned. Are we abandoning this place? I ventured. He nodded. We can hold out for 3 days at most. The main forces in Qingdao have already started pulling back to Weihai. And what about us? Fall back with them. He gazed into the distance. If we can make it there alive. Preparations for the evacuation began. Supplies were packed. Anything that could be carried was taken. While I was helping organize the medical supplies, I overheard 2 nurses talking. Did you see that mutant this morning? I've never seen one like it before. It's only been a few days, and they've already evolved to this. In a few more days. They didn't dare to say any more. I didn't dare to think about it either. If the infected continue to evolve like this, does humanity truly stand a chance? More bad news arrived. The highway to the west was cut off. What does that mean? A massive horde of the infected has occupied the only route. There are at least 5,000 of them. 5,000. The number silenced everyone. Taking a detour would add 200 kilometers. We don't have enough supplies. Force our way through? That's a suicide mission. The discussion reached a stalemate. Just then, someone made a crazy suggestion. Send a small team to lure them away, while the main force goes the other way. Who's going to be the bait? Another silence fell. I'll go. It was Lao Zhong. I immediately objected. Someone has to go, he said calmly. I have experience. Another veteran stepped forward. Then a third and a fourth. 10 people volunteered to form the decoy team. Watching them stand there as a unit, I suddenly understood the true meaning of sacrifice. The Last Supper. The food was much more plentiful than usual. Canned meat, crackers, and even a little chocolate. Everyone knew exactly what this was for. Lao Zhang sat next to me, and for once, he was very talkative. He spoke of his time in the army, of his comrades, of life in times of peace. You know, I always felt useless after leaving the army. I never thought I'd be of use again at the end of the world. Don't talk like that. It's not meant to be pessimistic, he said with a small smile. A person has to find their reason for living. Protecting those who need protection, that's my reason. I wanted to say something, but a lump formed in my throat. The night grew deep. We were to set out first thing in the morning. Stepping outside, I saw a sky full of stars, so beautiful it could make you cry. The world was about to end, yet the stars were still so bright. It was the woman, the little girl's mother. She nodded. I was thinking about my husband, what he would want us to do if he were still alive. We have to live on, for the sake of those who couldn't. She wiped away her tears. For in the morning, it was time to leave. The decoy team would leave first. The main group would follow half an hour later. Lao Zhang was in full gear, looking like a true soldier. Remember what I taught you. Protect yourself and protect others. You'll come back, right? He didn't answer. He just patted my shoulder, then turned, got in the vehicle and drove west. Their figures gradually disappeared from sight. Perhaps it was a final farewell. Then we set off, the large convoy moving slowly, like a wounded snake. Gunshots and explosions echoed from the distance. The decoy plan had begun. They had successfully drawn their attention. Word came from up ahead. The main force could pass through safely. But at what cost? No one dared to ask. As we passed the designated location, I saw the aftermath of the battle. The ground was littered with shell casings, and a large patch of it was stained with blood. A jeep lay overturned on the side of the road, empty. I recognized the vehicle. It was Lao Zhong's. The tears finally came. The convoy moved on, leaving that blood-soaked land behind. Lao Zhang was right. The world really had changed. I have to learn to be strong to survive, and for the sake of those who sacrificed themselves for us. The convoy crawled along the ruined highway. With Lao Zhang gone, I felt like I'd lost my backbone, but I knew this was no time for grief. "Where's Grandpa Zhang?" the little girl asked. I didn't know how to answer. Her mother held her tight. Grandpa Zhang went on a mission. The child seemed to understand, yet not fully. Around noon, the convoy stopped at an abandoned rest stop to resupply. The place had clearly seen a fight. The walls were riddled with bullet holes, dried bloodstains marked the ground, and a scorched smell lingered in the air. "We move out in 15 minutes, the commander ordered. Everyone got busy, scavenging for supplies in the abandoned shops, drawing water from a nearby well, and refueling the vehicles. As I was helping to move supplies, I noticed something strange. A few people were always huddled together, whispering and casting wary glances our way. Their vehicle was parked at the very back of the convoy. It seemed to be carrying far more than any of the other vehicles. "Don't stare," a middle-aged woman beside me whispered. "Those are Boss Chen's men." Boss Chen had been a construction contractor before the evacuation, with some 20-odd people under him. She lowered her voice. I heard they're hoarding a lot of supplies. At a time like this, hoarding supplies was tantamount to a death sentence for others. "Isn't anyone doing anything about it?" "Who would dare?" the woman replied with a bitter smile. "The military can barely look after itself." Suddenly, the sound of an argument erupted up ahead. A frail old man was kneeling on the ground, rice scattered before him. It was just a little rice. Standing before him was none other than Boss Chen, burly and coarse, with a thick gold chain around his neck. "Get lost." He kicked the old man over. "Beggar." The old man staggered as he tried to get back up. A large crowd had gathered, but no one dared to intervene. I clenched my fists and was about to step forward, but the woman held me back. "There are too many of them." Just then, a young military officer approached. "What's going on here?" Boss Chen's demeanor changed in an instant. "This old man tried to steal my food, and I caught him." "I wasn't stealing," the old man argued frantically. "I was trying to trade my watch for it." Trembling, he held up an old-fashioned watch. "Who wants your worthless piece of junk?" Boss Chen scoffed. The officer glanced at the two men, then at the rice on the ground. "Clean up the rice. Everyone, disperse." "But this old man," I said, "disperse." The officer repeated, his voice stern. Sullenly, Boss Chen had his men gather the rice, and he shot the old man a vicious glare. The officer helped the old man to his feet and discreetly slipped him a can of food. "Make it last." The old man's eyes welled up with tears of gratitude. This scene did not go unnoticed by the crowd. "Let's go," the woman said, pulling me away. The cracks had already begun to form. The convoy pressed on. As we were crossing a bridge spanning the river, word came through. The road ahead was blocked by another group of survivors. "They're demanding a toll," the scout reported. 10 rations per vehicle. There were murmurs of indignation. The commander frowned. "How many of them are there?" 50 or 60, by the looks of it. "And they're armed." The convoy was caught in a dilemma. Forcing a way through would likely cause casualties, but a detour would consume precious supplies. Just as the commander was hesitating, Boss Chen stepped forward. "I have a suggestion. We're not short on weapons. Let's just force our way through. Run down anyone who tries to stop us." The young officer immediately objected. "They're survivors, too." Boss Chen sneered. "You call roadside robbers survivors?" The two sides erupted into an argument. I studied the scene ahead. The people blocking the road truly looked like refugees dressed in rags, their faces sallow and gaunt. They had blocked the bridge with derelict vehicles and were holding makeshift weapons. "Perhaps we could negotiate," I suggested. All eyes turned to me. "What do you know?" Boss Chen scoffed. "We should at least try," I insisted. "A fight benefits no one." After a moment's consideration, the commander decided to send a party to negotiate. A few representatives went forward to negotiate, and I volunteered to go with them. Despite the objections from many, I went anyway. Only upon getting closer did I see how much worse off they were than us. Many were injured, and the children were little more than skin and bones. Their eyes were filled with desperation and wariness. "We're not robbers," said the middle-aged man leading them. "We're refugees from Jiangcheng. We haven't eaten in 3 days." "That doesn't give you the right to block the road," one of our representatives said. "If we don't, we'll starve to death," someone shouted from their group. "What happened to the government's promised aid? Where are the army supplies?" The atmosphere grew tense. "We're refugees too," I said, speaking up. "We're all just trying to survive." "Then give us some of your food," one of Boss Chen's men yelled. "If you want food, go find it yourselves." Just as a fight was about to break out, I hurriedly said, "We can spare some basic supplies, but not too many. In return, you have to tell us what it's like up ahead." Both sides hesitated. "It's dangerous up ahead." The middle-aged man finally spoke. "Qingzhou City has completely fallen. It's crawling with those monsters. And what? An armed group has taken over the highway toll station, robbing passers-by. They have guns. The news made everyone's expression grow grim. We gave them a portion of our supplies. It wasn't much, but it was enough to last them a few days. With tears welling in his eyes, the middle-aged man said, "Good luck to you." The bridge cleared, and the convoy moved on. Back in the vehicle, the woman looked at me in surprise. "That was very brave of you. Someone has to step up." As evening fell, we stopped for the night at an abandoned gas station. Bastian was furious about what had happened earlier and was busy riling everyone up. "A bunch of bleeding hearts," he shouted. "We're already short on supplies, and now we're giving them away to strangers. Next time, we just run them over. It's the apocalypse. What use is morality?" His men all voiced their agreement. Sitting in the corner and listening to their words, I felt a chill run down my spine. Old Zhong used to say that the most terrifying thing in the apocalypse isn't the zombies, but the loss of humanity. Ignore them. The woman sat down next to me. "I'm Sister Lu. And you?" "That's a nice name," she said with a smile. "It means hope." Most everyone was asleep, so I went outside for some air. The sentry watched me warily. "Don't go too far." I nodded and leaned against an abandoned car. The moonlight was bright, illuminating the desolate highway. The fields in the distance were deathly still, save for an occasional, unidentifiable cry. It was the young military officer. "Thank you for what you did today. It was the right thing to do." He leaned against the car and lit a cigarette. "You should smoke less. How long do you think we can last?" He was silent for a moment. "To be honest, supplies are dwindling and the number of infected is growing." But what? "But as long as a single one of us is left alive, there is hope." He gazed into the distance. "That is our creed as soldiers." Suddenly, the sound of an engine came from the distance. The sentry shouted an alarm. Everyone was startled awake. A set of headlights appeared at the end of the road, growing steadily closer. "It's that armed group." Tension rippled through the group. "Get ready to fight." At the command, everyone scrambled for cover and grabbed their weapons. The convoy drew closer, revealing 5 modified SUVs with machine guns mounted on top. A voice called out from their side through a megaphone, "We mean you no harm." But everyone remained on high alert. The convoy stopped 50 meters away, and a man in camouflage carrying a white flag approached. "We're the search and rescue team from the Qingzhou survivor camp," he yelled. "We received your distress signal." "We didn't send any distress signal," Li Wei said, frowning. "Not you." The man was taken aback. "But the coordinates we received were for this exact location." The atmosphere turned eerie. Just then, Bastian suddenly yelled, "It's a trap. They're here to rob us." Li Cheng tried to stop him, but it was too late. In a panic, one of Bastian's men fired his gun, hitting the man with the white flag. The other side returned fire instantly, and the air exploded with the sound of gunfire. Tracer rounds streaked across the night sky. "Cease fire!" Li Cheng screamed, but no one listened. I pulled the mother and daughter behind a truck for cover as bullets slammed into its chassis with terrifying thuds. The little girl was crying. People fell as they were shot, their screams echoing one after another. Then came a more terrifying sound, the roars of the infected. The gunfire had drawn them. Countless red eyes emerged from the darkness. Drawn by the gunfire and the scent of blood, the infected swarmed in from all directions. "Take on the infected together." At that, everyone panicked. Both sides ceased fire, turning to face the common threat. But it was too late. The infected surged forward like a tidal wave. People were pounced on before they could react, their piercing screams tearing through the night sky. "Everyone, get to the cars." The scene descended into utter chaos. People scrambled madly for the vehicles. Some were overtaken by the infected, others were trampled, and still others were separated in the mayhem. I grabbed the mother and daughter and ran for the nearest vehicle. An infected lunged at me. I smashed the iron rod into its head, sending black blood flying. "Hurry, get in." Just as I scrambled aboard, I witnessed a horrifying sight. To save his own skin, Bastian was shoving people aside, even kicking a wounded companion off the truck. "Help me," the man cried out desperately. But Bastian's truck was already pulling away. The infected swarmed him. I closed my eyes, unable to watch any longer. The convoy shattered, each vehicle scattering to save itself. A dozen or so of us were crammed into our truck, the driver frantically flooring the accelerator. "The gas station is overrun with infected." "I can see them tearing at something," Sister Lu murmured. I watched the landscape blur past the window, my heart twisting in agony. Out of fear, suspicion, and selfishness, we had turned on one another. And the true enemy reaped the benefits of our discord. Old Zhong was right. Human nature is the ultimate test in the apocalypse. We pulled over on a hillside. Only 6 other vehicles had made it. We had lost over half our people. Boss Chen's truck was, of course, one of them. As he got out of his truck, he was still complaining. It was all their fault. If they hadn't started shooting. Shut up, Li Wei roared. Your people shot first. That was self-defense. Self-defense, my ass. The two almost came to blows. I helped the mother and her daughter down from the truck. The little girl was still sobbing. Her mother's eyes were vacant. Most of our people are dead, all because of a foolish misunderstanding and selfish choices. The voice came from behind. It was the man from the search party last night, his arm injured. We really were here on a rescue mission, he said with a wry smile. We picked up the coordinates and thought there were survivors in need of help. Nan. 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 What's the use of saying that now? At least, he said, gazing north, I can tell you that there really is a large survivor encampment in Chizhou, if that's where you're headed. In the midst of such despair, that information was precious. But after this night, how many of us could still cling to hope? All I knew was that we had to keep going, even if we were walking into an abyss. The early morning sun cast its light on the ruined highway, but it could not warm our hearts. After the chaos of the previous night, fewer than 40 survivors were left. The injured needed treatment, the vehicles needed repairs, but worst of all, trust had been utterly shattered. Boss Chen and his men commandeered 2 vehicles, clearly separating themselves from everyone else. From now on, we're on our own. Don't expect anything from us. Li Wei looked like he wanted to object, but seeing he was outnumbered, he held his tongue. The wounded were gathered in a truck. As I helped dress their wounds, I saw how pitifully few medical supplies we had. Go easy on them. This is the last of our stock. A man who'd been shot in the shoulder groaned in agony. The bullet's still in there, but we don't have any surgical tools. It's going to get infected, I said worriedly. Infection. The man chuckled grimly, is better than turning into one of those monsters. We stopped at an abandoned village. The place was deathly still, the houses empty, the only sound the moaning of the wind. Li Wei gave the order, split up and scavenge for supplies. Work in pairs. No one goes off alone. Sister Lu and I paired up to search a few houses on the eastern edge of the village. Pushing open the door to the first house, we were hit by a foul stench. The bodies of a family of 3 lay neatly on the floor, an apparent suicide by poisoning. On the wall, a message was written in blood. In the next life, may we be a family again. Sister Lu sighed. Maybe this is better. On the strength of this, one of Boss Chen's men brandished a machete. On the strength of this, one of Boss Chen's men brandished a machete. The atmosphere instantly grew tense. The atmosphere instantly grew tense. Li Wei stepped forward. Is this really the time for infighting? Li Wei stepped forward. Is this really the time for infighting? Control your men and mind your own business, Boss Chen sneered. Control your men and mind your own business, Boss Chen sneered. Just as tensions were about to boil over, a little boy suddenly pointed to the village entrance and shouted, "There's someone over there." Just as tensions were about to boil over, a little boy suddenly pointed to the village entrance and shouted, "There's someone over there." Everyone turned to look and saw a figure standing motionless at the village entrance. Everyone turned to look and saw a figure standing motionless at the village entrance. Is it a survivor? Is it a survivor? Be careful. Li Wei signaled for everyone to remain on high alert. Be careful. Li Wei signaled for everyone to remain on high alert. The figure slowly turned around. It was one of the infected, and it wasn't alone. The figure slowly turned around. It was one of the infected, and it wasn't alone. More of the infected poured out from all sides of the village, completely surrounding us. More of the infected poured out from all sides of the village, completely surrounding us. It's a trap. There was something unusual about these infected. They didn't attack immediately, but instead closed in slowly, as if hurting their prey. They've gotten smarter. My heart sank. Get to the vehicles now. But it was too late. The infected had already launched their attack, moving with astonishing speed. Chaos erupted once more. These infected were far more formidable. They knew how to dodge attacks, coordinate their encirclements, and even use simple weapons. Li Wei yelled himself hoarse, trying to give orders, but there was no semblance of order left in the panicked crowd. Boss Chen was the first to make a break for his car, leaving even his injured men behind. One of his men with an injured leg cried out desperately behind him, but Boss Chen drove away without a second glance. Witnessing this, the others completely lost faith in Boss Chen. That bastard! As the number of infected swelled, I protected the mother and daughter, fighting as we retreated. The little girl was wailing in terror, and her mother held her tight. An infected lunged forward. I swung the iron rod with all my strength to knock it down, but more of them were already swarming us. Just as despair set in, a military truck came roaring towards us. It was the search and rescue team from the previous night. The truck plowed through the infected in its path and came to a firm stop right in front of us. What are you standing around for? Snapping out of their daze, everyone scrambled to get onto the truck. A heavy machine gun mounted on the truck unleashed a torrent of fire, mowing down the infected in droves. I had just pushed the mother and daughter aboard when I scrambled up after them. Is everyone on board? I looked around. Li Wei was here, along with a dozen or so other survivors. But at least 7 or 8 people hadn't made it, including the man Boss Chen had abandoned. The truck roared to life again and burst through the encirclement. Behind us, the village was completely engulfed by the infected. Li Wei said to one of the rescue team members. The man shook his head. My name is Zhang Tao. What happened last night wasn't your fault. We do have a camp, Zhang Tao said earnestly. It's in the mountains on the northern outskirts of Qizhou, and it's relatively safe. Why did you save us? Sister Lu asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. A wry smile appeared on Zhang Tao's face. Because we've been abandoned before too. We know exactly how that despair feels. Silence filled the truck's cargo bed. How much farther to the camp? 50 kilometers in a straight line, but we have to take a detour. The main roads are overrun with infected. I noticed Boss Chen's car following us from a distance. They're still following us. Zhang Tao glanced in the rearview mirror. Once we reach the camp, we have our own rules. The convoy stopped on an overpass to rest. The spot offered a wide field of view, making it easy to defend and difficult to assault. Everyone got out to stretch their legs and take stock of the survivors and remaining supplies. Including Zhang Tao's 5-person rescue team, there were 23 of us left. Supplies were dangerously low, enough water for only 2 days, and food was even scarcer. We have to find supplies, and fast. Zhang Tao pointed to the map. There's a logistics center 10 kilometers ahead. There might still be supplies there. Will there be infected there? Definitely, Zhang Tao said frankly. Which is why we need volunteers. His words were met with a long silence. After witnessing so much tragedy, who would be willing to put their life on the line again? Li Wei stood up. I stood up too. Sister Lu grabbed me. Are you crazy? Someone has to go. Old Zhang taught me you can't survive just by hiding. A 6-person search party was formed. Myself, Li Cheng, Zhang Tao, and 2 of his teammates, and a young man named Xiao Chen. In and out, quick, Zhang Tao instructed. If we encounter a large horde of infected, we retreat. The little girl ran over and pressed a small cloth doll into my hand. She whispered, to keep you safe. I patted her head. Thank you. The logistics center was even more desolate than imagined. The massive warehouses stood like tombstones. In the parking lot, abandoned trucks were strewn about, tilted and overturned. Zhang Tao made the arrangements. I'll take Xiao Chen to Area A, and Li Wei will take Lin Chenxi to Area B. We'll meet back here in 15 minutes. Area B was the food warehouse. As we pushed open the heavy doors, a wave of musty air washed over us. The shelves were mostly empty, with all sorts of packaging scattered across the floor. It looked like the place had already been looted. But we conducted a thorough search anyway. In a corner, I found several boxes of compressed biscuits. And these, Li Wei said, having found some canned goods. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Just as we were preparing to leave, we heard gunshots outside. We rushed outside. At the entrance to the Area A warehouse, Zhang Tao and Xiao Chen were battling a horde of the infected. These infected were unusual. They wore tattered security uniforms, seemingly the mutated guards who once worked here. Back up. Li Cheng opened fire, providing cover. I immediately charged forward. An infected lunged at Xiao Chen, and I knocked it back with a sweeping blow. Zhang Tao yelled, "We fight and fall back." A massive figure burst out from the warehouse. It was a mutant, larger than any we'd seen before, with knotted muscles and blood-red eyes. The mutant slammed a fist into the ground, and the concrete shattered on impact. I remembered old Zhong's teaching, concentrate fire on the knees. But the mutant's skin was as thick as armor. Bullets merely left shallow marks. Use fire. Zhang Tao yelled, hurling a Molotov cocktail. Flames engulfed the mutant, which let out a deafening roar. Seizing the opportunity, we quickly retreated. When we reached the parking lot, we discovered an even worse situation. Boss Chen's men were hijacking our truck. Li Cheng let out a furious roar. Calm down. Boss Chen sneered, we're just borrowing it for a bit. His men had already overpowered those who had stayed behind to guard. A wise man adapts to the circumstances, Boss Chen said smugly. What use are kindness and morality anymore? Just then, the burning mutant came charging out. Though engulfed in fire, its speed hadn't slowed in the slightest. The monster's here. Boss Chen's men began to panic. The mutant charged straight into the crowd, tearing an unsuspecting hijacker in two. Fire. But in their panic, their shooting was erratic. The mutant rampaged through the crowd, each blow taking a life. Zhang Tao gave a low command, and we charged for the truck in the ensuing chaos. Li Wei floored a hijacker with one punch and reclaimed the driver's seat. I covered the others as they scrambled into the truck. The engine roared to life, and the truck tore out of the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, Boss Chin was cursing hysterically, but his voice was quickly swallowed by agonizing screams. The mutant was on a killing spree. Xiao Qin angrily pounded on the truck window. Why did it have to be this way? Because they made a choice, Zhang Tao said calmly. When you choose to abandon your humanity, you must bear the consequences. By the time we got back to camp, the sun was already low in the west. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief to see us return safely. The little girl, especially, ran and threw her arms around me. Big sister, you're back. I suddenly felt the urge to cry. In this broken world, just having someone who cares if you live or die is a blessing in itself. That evening, everyone sat gathered around the campfire. Li Wei distributed the supplies we'd found to everyone. It wasn't much, but everyone cherished their share. What about Boss Chin and his men? Someone asked. Zhang Tao stood up. We're leaving for the main camp first thing tomorrow. The road will be difficult, so everyone get some rest. The night deepened, but I couldn't sleep. Scenes from the day kept replaying in my mind. Boss Chen's greed, his men's betrayal, and their ultimate comeuppance. What are you thinking about? About human nature. Why, in the apocalypse, do some choose to be protectors, while others choose to descend into depravity? He was silent for a moment. Maybe that's just their nature. The apocalypse simply magnifies what's already inside a person's heart. And what about us? He smiled. We choose to remain human. The roars of the infected could be heard in the distance. But for tonight, at least, we were safe. At least for tonight, we still hold on to the light of our humanity. Another trial begins. As long as there are people like Li Wei and Zhang Tao, hope will never be extinguished. Old Zhong used to say that to live on is not merely to survive, but to prove that, even in the apocalypse, humanity can still choose goodness. At 4 a.m, well before dawn, we set out for the camp in the mountains. Zhang Tao led the way, the two trucks creeping slowly forward. The morning fog was thick, with visibility under 10 meters. Once we're past the river bridge ahead, we'll be safe. The camp is on the other side of the mountain. But I had an unsettling premonition. As we neared the bridge, Zhang Tao suddenly slammed on the brakes. He pointed ahead. Look. Vaguely, we could make out countless figures swarming the bridge. The infected. A hopelessly large number of them. Li Qing made a suggestion, but Zhang Tao shook his head. This is the only bridge. The next one is 50 kilometers downstream, but it's even more dangerous over there. Just then, I noticed a building at the head of the bridge. What's that? Zhang Tao took out his binoculars. It's a checkpoint left behind when the military evacuated. Li Qing took a look as well. There might be gear inside. A wild plan began to form in my mind. If we could just get to the checkpoint. What are you thinking? Zhang Tao asked, suddenly alert. I took a deep breath. Old Zhong used to say that sometimes you have to go on the offensive. The four of us crept toward the checkpoint, me, Li Wei, Zhang Tao, and his teammate, Wang Li. The others remained with the trucks on standby. The checkpoint door was ajar. Inside, the place was a wreck, with dried bloodstains on the floor and bullet holes riddling the walls. Be careful, Li Wei said, rifle at the ready as he moved ahead. The checkpoint wasn't large. We searched it quickly. No infected, but no living souls either. Wang Li shouted excitedly, the shelves are stacked with all kinds of gear. Rifles, grenades, even a heavy machine gun. And this. Zhang Tao pointed to several crates of explosives in the corner. The military must have planned to blow the bridge, he explained, but it looks like they didn't get the chance. I stared at the explosives, the plan in my mind solidifying. We could. No way. Li Wei objected immediately. It's too dangerous. But it's our only chance, I insisted. There have to be at least 1,000 infected on that bridge. A direct assault would be suicide. Wang Li understood. But who's going to plant the explosives? Another silence fell. I'll go. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me at once. Are you insane? Li Cheng grabbed my shoulders. Old Zhang sacrificed himself to save us, I said calmly. Now it's my turn. There has to be another way. There isn't, Zhang Tao said heavily. She's right. We began to formulate a plan. The explosives had to be placed on the bridge piers, which meant someone needed to draw the infected's attention. I'll plant them. You all provide cover and pick up. I'm going with you, Li Wei said firmly. I shook my head. I need you on the heavy machine gun. In the midst of our argument, Wang Li suddenly spoke up. Let me go. I have experience with demolitions. Zhang Tao looked at his teammate. Old Wang. Don't get sentimental, Wang Li said with a small smile. Someone has to do it. The final plan was set. Wang Li would plant the explosives while Li Wei and I provided cover with the heavy machine gun. Zhang Tao would handle the pickup and the others would get ready to cross quickly. 6 in the morning. The operation began. The thick fog provided the perfect cover. Wang Li, with the explosives on his back, moved silently toward the bridge piers. Li Wei and I set up the heavy machine gun on the checkpoint roof, waiting for him to get into position before opening fire. Through the scope, I could see the infected on the bridge. They stood perfectly still, like an army of statues. Once startled, they would become reapers of death. 5 minutes passed. Wang Li's figure disappeared beneath the bridge. He must be in position. I took a deep breath and squeezed the trigger. The roar of the heavy machine gun shattered the morning silence. Instantly, the infected were roused. The simultaneous roars of 1,000 infected were deafening. They charged frantically toward the source of the gunfire. Keep firing. Bullets rained down. The infected fell in droves, but more charged on, trampling over the bodies of their own kind. A black tide of the infected surged forward. Where's Wang Jiao? I searched anxiously for him. Wang Jiao was planting the last explosive charge, but a few infected had already spotted him. Cover him. I swung my rifle around, but he was too far away and I didn't have a clear shot. Just as the infected were about to pounce on Wang Jiao. Boom. He had detonated a grenade he was carrying. In the flash of the explosion, Wang Jiao's figure vanished. Zhang Tao roared into the radio, but there was no response. To make matters worse, the infected had already reached the base of the checkpoint building. Li Cheng grabbed me, and we turned and ran. We leaped from the rooftop to the adjacent one-story building, then down to the ground. The infected swarmed in like a tide. Get in the truck. Zhang Tao came roaring over in the truck. We jumped into the truck, and it immediately spun around. The explosives? With bloodshot eyes, Zhang Tao slammed the detonator. Ruinable. A tremendous explosion followed. The entire bridge shuddered from the blast, its piers beginning to crumble. The infected on the bridge plunged into the river below in droves. But the bridge did not completely collapse. Not enough explosives. Zhang Tao gritted his teeth. Wang Jiao didn't have time to finish planting them. The broken bridge deck teetered precariously, but still clung to the opposite bank. Some of the infected began trying to cross the ruined bridge after us. Charge across. I yelled. Zhang Tao slammed on the gas, and the truck roared onto the swaying bridge deck. The other 3 vehicles followed close behind. The bridge deck was collapsing, with the churning river right below us. Infected lunged from both sides as the truck swerved left and right, crushing everything in its path. An infected climbed onto the window, and I knocked it off with an iron bar. More infected swarmed the truck. Just in the nick of time, the bridge deck finally gave way and began to collapse on a massive scale. The truck's engine roared as it sped desperately across the crumbling bridge. Behind us, sections of the bridge fell one after another, like a line of dominoes. The shrieks of the infected mixed with the screech of tearing steel, a symphony from hell. The truck finally made it to the other side. Behind us, the bridge had completely collapsed. The churning river had swallowed everything, including Wang Jiao. Zhang Tao knelt on the ground, weeping silently. The others were silent, the atmosphere heavy and somber. Another hero had fallen. How much further? Zhang Tao wiped his tears and stood up. 10 kilometers. 10 kilometers, bought with Wang Jiao's life. The convoy pressed on, entering a mountainous region. The scenery here was completely different, embraced by mountains and dense forests. It was as if the apocalypse had never happened. But perhaps this was just a facade. The real test was only just beginning. Around noon, we finally reached the camp. It was a small base built against a mountain, enclosed by high walls. The main gate opened slowly, revealing another world behind it. Orderly buildings, bustling crowds, and even the laughter of children. Welcome to Hope Base. We were greeted by a middle-aged woman in a clean white lab coat, her gaze firm yet gentle. I'm in charge here. You can call me Dr. Liu. Looking at everything before me, I could hardly believe my eyes. Children played in the courtyard, the elderly chatted in the sun, and the young people were all at their posts, some tending the vegetable patches, others repairing equipment. This place was like a small, self-sufficient society. You've had a long journey, Dr. Liu said. If you need anything, don't hesitate to find me. We were assigned to the dormitory area. It was simple, but clean and most importantly, safe. The mother and daughter could finally get a proper night's sleep. The little girl tugged my hand and asked in a small voice, "Is it really safe here?" I stroked her hair and said softly, "It's very safe here." But that night, I lay awake for a long time. The final image of Wang Jiao replayed endlessly in my mind. He knew it was a path to certain death, yet he charged forward without a moment's hesitation. Just like old Zhong. These heroes forged a path for us with their lives. Still alive. What's on your mind? He sat on the steps beside me, thinking about the ones who died. Zhong, Wang Li, and the others whose names I never knew. Their deaths won't be in vain. Li Qing lit a cigarette. As long as we're still alive, their sacrifice has meaning. But can this world ever recover? Li was silent for a long time. I don't know, he finally said, but we can try to rebuild. Dr. Lu showed us around the base. There are over 500 people here, most of them refugees from all over. We have our own generator, a well, and farmland, she explained. We're basically self-sufficient. What about the infected? Zhang Tao asked. The mountain terrain is complex. It's hard for them to get up here. Besides, she said, pointing to the surrounding barbed wire fence, we have a comprehensive defense system. It certainly seemed that way, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The people here seemed safe, but there was something indescribable in their eyes. It was despair. I wandered around the base, trying to find an answer. In the infirmary, I saw a familiar figure. It was the man who'd been shot in the shoulder. He was lying on a cot, his face pale. The wound's infected, a nurse whispered. I'm afraid he won't make it through the night. Aren't there any antibiotics? The nurse shook her head. My heart sank. If they couldn't even provide basic medical care, could this place truly be called safe? An announcement came over the base's loudspeaker. Attention all residents. A curfew is in effect after 10 p.m. tonight. No one is permitted outdoors. A curfew after 10? I asked a passerby. It's not safe at night, he said, his expression tense. Those things will come. What things? But he had already hurried away. I sat down next to Lu. How do you like this place? It's not bad. But the unease in my heart grew stronger. It's much better than the outside, she said with a long sigh. Finally, I can get a peaceful night's sleep. But that very night, I was woken by a strange sound. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like something was hitting the wall. I crept to the window and pulled the curtain aside, just a crack to look out. Outside the base's perimeter wall stood several figures, the infected. They stood there silently, motionless, as if waiting for something. Don't look. A voice from behind made me jump. It was Dr. Lu. What are those? The night wanderers, she said calmly. They come every night. What do they want? She walked over to my side. Perhaps they're just curious. But I knew that wasn't right. The infected aren't curious. They only have the instinct to kill. Unless they're waiting for something, I blurted out. Dr. Lu glanced at me. You're very perceptive. She was silent for a moment, then said, on the 15th of every month, we make a sacrifice. Her voice was very soft. To buy another month of peace. I felt my blood run cold. You're insane. It's the only way, she said, turning to face me. If we didn't do this, the base would have fallen long ago. I thought of the look in the eyes of the people at the base. It wasn't numbness, nor was it despair. It was fear. Everyone lived in fear of being the next one. Who decides? My voice was trembling. Dr. Lu said, it's fair and impartial. This is murder. This is survival, she said coolly. One person dies so 500 can live. I remembered old Zhong's words. The greatest test of the apocalypse. To survive, the people here had chosen to abandon their humanity. Tomorrow is the 15th, Dr. Lu said. You'll have to take part in the lottery too. I refuse. You don't have a choice, her tone became stern. Those are the rules of the base. I wanted to resist, but here, we were the vulnerable ones. Back in the dorm, I told Li Wei and Zhang Tao about the situation. Zhang Tao clenched his fists in anger. We have to leave this place. I gave a wry smile. It's a world of the infected out there. Still better than this place. But the reality was harsh. We had no vehicle, no weapons. It would be a death sentence. The next morning, the drawing ceremony began. All adults were required to participate. A wooden box was filled with slips of paper. One, marked with a red dot, was for this month. People lined up, drawing their lots one after another. Fear was written on every face. When it was the turn of Lu Jia, the woman ahead of me, her hands were trembling. She unfolded the paper. It was blank. She breathed a sigh of relief. But I knew she would have to draw again next month. Then it was my turn. I reached for a slip, my heart threatening to stop. The paper unfolded in my hand. It was blank. They were all blank. The one who drew the red dot was a frail, middle-aged man. He collapsed to the ground, sobbing in despair. Why me again? Why me? Someone nearby explained that he had narrowly escaped last month. This wasn't a fair drawing, but a premeditated selection. The weak, the sick, those deemed useless. They were always the ones to be chosen. That night, the man was taken outside the walls. We were forced to watch. Dr. Lu said it was part of the ritual. The infected slowly closed in on the helpless man. His screams tore through the night sky. I shut my eyes, unable to watch any longer. But the screaming went on. The truth of Hope Base was that it wasn't a sanctuary at all, but another kind of hell, a facade of civilization sustained by fear and sacrifice. I found Li Wei and Zhang Tao. We have to leave. How? Zhang Tao asked. They won't let us go. Then we'll sneak out. And go where? I remembered the message from the radio. The army's last line of defense. It might have fallen by now. We have to at least go and see. We can't just wait here to die. Li Wei nodded. I agree. It may be dangerous outside, but at least we'll have our dignity. We began to formulate an escape plan. The most crucial part was to get the mother and her daughter out with us. They were too young to live in such constant fear. The plan was risky, but we had no other choice. Because I knew that if we stayed, one day, we too would become sacrifices. Lao Zheng and Wang Li didn't sacrifice themselves for us to just scrape by in a place like this. They sacrificed themselves so we could live with dignity and die as human beings, not be slaughtered like cattle. As the time for action neared, I gripped the steel pipe Lao Zheng had left behind, my resolve hardening. Perhaps another hell awaited us, but it would be a hell of our own choosing. At 3 a.m, the entire base was sound asleep. I went to get the mother and daughter first. Tiptoeing to their room, I gently pushed the door open. The little girl was fast asleep, clutching a rag doll. I gently shook the mother awake and gestured, "Follow me." The woman saw the look on my face and understood immediately. She picked up her child and followed me out of the dormitory. Li Wei was waiting at the armory. He had already taken out the guard with ease. We grabbed a few rifles, some ammunition, and a handful of grenades. Zhang Tao was over at the garage. The base had 2 SUVs, and he had picked the one in better condition. "Tank's full. Water and food are in the trunk," he reported quietly. "What about the others?" Li Wei asked. "Lu Jia and her group?" I hesitated. Zhang Tao shook his head. "More people means a bigger target, and they might not even want to leave." His words were painful, but true. Many had grown accustomed to this kind of safety, even one built on the suffering of others. "Let's go." The SUV started up slowly, creeping toward the main gate. There were sentries at the gate, but they were usually dozing at this hour. The man in the watchtower was leaning against a wall, resting. We held our breath as we slowly passed through. Just as we were about to clear the base, an alarm suddenly blared. "Someone is escaping." "Damn it." Zhang Tao slammed his foot on the gas, and the SUV shot out of the gate. The base behind us lit up, filled with the clamor of voices, but we had already plunged into the dark mountain forest. "Are they going to come after us?" the little girl, woken by the noise, asked in fear. I reassured her, "We're safe now." But I knew the real danger had only just begun. The mountain road was treacherous, and we were unfamiliar with the route. To make matters worse, our fuel was limited. "Which way?" Zhang Tao asked. Li Wei pulled out a map. "We follow the mountain road out, then head straight for Qingdao." "How much further to Qingdao?" 150 kilometers. In peacetime, this distance would be nothing, but now, every kilometer was a test of life and death. The sky slowly brightened. The mountain forest, shrouded in morning mist, appeared and disappeared from view. The occasional birdsong created the illusion that the world was still a beautiful place. But that illusion was quickly shattered. Along the mountain road, we came upon a village. Black smoke was rising from the village. Li Wei made a suggestion, but Zhang Tao shook his head. "We're running out of fuel. There might be a gas station in the village. We have no choice but to risk it." The scene in the village was chilling. Most of the houses had collapsed, and the streets were strewn with wreckage. Worst of all, strange sounds emanated from many of the houses. I whispered. Li Wei tightened his grip on his rifle. We moved cautiously through the village. We found a gas station at the edge of the village, but the pumps had been destroyed, and the underground tanks were empty. "All this for nothing," Zhang Tao said in frustration. A figure rose from the wreckage. It was one of the infected. But it didn't attack right away. Instead, it let out a strange cry. Li Wei's face fell. "It's calling for others." More of the infected swarmed in from all directions, their movements far more coordinated than any we had seen before. They were clearly organized. The SUV sped out of the village, with a horde of the infected in pursuit. They were surprisingly fast, managing to keep pace with the vehicle. "These things have evolved," Zhang Tao said as he drove. One of the infected leaped onto the roof, clawing at the window. Li Wei leaned out of the sunroof and knocked it off with a single shot. But more of them were swarming the vehicle. "There's a slope up ahead," I yelled, pointing. Zhang Tao accelerated up the hill. Unable to match our speed, the infected were finally left behind. But our predicament was far from over. The fuel tank was nearly empty. "Another 20 kilometers to the main highway," Li Wei said, looking at the map. "The fuel won't last that long," said Zhang Tao. We were in a desperate situation. Just then, the sound of a helicopter reached us from the distance. The military. A military helicopter appeared on the horizon, flying in our direction. "Signal them," Li Wei fired his rifle into the air, trying to get their attention. The helicopter seemed to spot us and began circling overhead. But it didn't land. Instead, it continued on its course to the north. Where were they going? We got our answer. A massive base had appeared in the valley ahead. It was no temporary camp, but a proper military base. High walls stood tall, armored vehicles were arrayed in rows, and fighter jets circled overhead. The Qingdao Naval Base. Zhang Tao murmured in disbelief. It must be the forward command post, said Li Wei. They've established a new line of defense here. Hope was rekindled. We abandoned the vehicle, which was about to run out of fuel, and headed for the base on foot. Along the way, we met other survivors, some traveling alone, others in groups, but all with the same destination, the base that symbolized hope. I heard the military has secured the Qingdao port, someone said. They're organizing an evacuation. Really? Absolutely. My friend is over there. The news spread quickly, and everyone grew excited. We finally reached the perimeter of the base, where the security checks were much stricter than before. Full-body decontamination, blood tests, and detailed questioning. Where have you come from? An officer asked. Through Hope Base, Li Wei replied. The officer frowned. Hope Base? That cult. They murder the innocent in the name of sacrifice, the officer explained. We're preparing to wipe them out. I breathed a sigh of relief. At least someone was still fighting for justice. After passing the screening, we were assigned to the refugee area. The conditions here were much better than at Hope Base. Most importantly, people were treated with dignity. No one would be used as a sacrificial offering. Good news came over the broadcast. Qingdao Port had been fully secured. Starting tomorrow, naval vessels will begin transporting survivors to Taiwan, which is still free of the outbreak, an officer explained. It will serve as a temporary settlement. To me, it was an unfamiliar place, but one that still held hope. I sat outside the tent, gazing up at the starry sky. The little girl ran over and sat down beside me. Are we going to get on the boat now? Yes, I said, stroking her hair. To a very beautiful place. Will Daddy be there waiting for us? I didn't know how to answer. Her father was likely long gone, but I couldn't bring myself to shatter her hope. Perhaps he's already there, waiting. At dawn the next day, the evacuation began. Buses carried us to the port. Along the way, we could still see traces of the infected, but they no longer posed a threat. The defensive line established by the military was impregnable. When we reached the port, the sight of the warship nearly brought me to tears. That colossal steel behemoth was like a Noah's Ark of hope. Everyone boarded in sequence. The line was long, but perfectly orderly. When our turn came, a naval officer was checking identification papers. Lin Chensi, new media editor, he read aloud from my profile. Anything you want to say to your family? We'll broadcast it over the radio. Perhaps someone will hear it. After a moment's thought, I spoke into the microphone. If you're still alive, know that I love you. I will be waiting for you in Taiwan. Tears streamed down my face. As I boarded the ship, I looked back one last time at the mainland, the land that gave me life, now ravaged and in ruins. One day, we will return and rebuild this land. The warship set sail. As we left Qingdao Port, everyone bid farewell to the mainland. Some stood in silence, others prayed. The little girl tugged my hand and asked, will we ever come back? I watched the coastline recede into the distance and nodded with conviction. We will. We will definitely return. A sea breeze swept across the deck. The sun rose from the horizon, bathing the ocean in a golden light. It was a new dawn. Though the road ahead was unknown and our homeland had fallen, we were still alive. Old Zhang once said, to survive is, in itself, an act of defiance. Wang Li had said, someone always has to do the right thing. Now it was our turn to carry on the spirit, to sow the seeds of hope in a new land. One day, when we are strong enough, we will return to this land, not as refugees, but as its rebuilders. Forever our home. Seagulls soared at the ship's bow as if guiding our way. A new world awaited. And in my heart, the voices of old Zhong and Wang Li remained as clear as ever. Survive. Live on and live well for all those who could not. And we would. For this is the meaning of being human. To fight for the light, even in the darkest of times. To live for hope, even in the depths of despair. This is our story, a tale of escape, sacrifice, and hope. A tale of how the human spirit shines, even at the end of the world. The story ends.